Good evening, everybody. It's Mario with Motorcycle Knuckle Busters, and we're back at it again with another episode. We just want to remind everybody, we try to show here the diversity of the motorcycle community. I know that we have a lot of great folks out there that ride, enjoy motorcycles, but they have passions beyond the bikes. All right. I know that I do personally. I try to get involved with some different causes, do some different things. But our next guest has really taken a cause to heart. And it's something that over the last couple of years, and especially the last few months, really has come to my attention a lot. And I'm very proud we're going to have her on, that she's going to be able to tell us a little bit more about her story, but tell us about her cause. All right. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Laura Trantham.
Hi, Mario. Yeah, Lauren Trantham.
Okay. So sometimes, there's just things that want to tongue tie me, and that was one of them. So, but, we're going to get into a lot of things, and I want to really, probably go down the rabbit hole a little bit about the cause and everything that you work with and what you're doing out there. But let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about you, where you were born, where you were raised, and a little bit about your family. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Alaska, actually, which was an amazing childhood to have out in the outdoors and doing all kinds of adventurous things. And nowadays I'm in Southern Oregon, and it's also really beautiful here. So I'm happy.
Okay. Now, where in Alaska were you?
Eagle River.
Oh, Eagle River. Yeah, I've been to Eagle River.
Small town outside of Anchorage, and
right outside of Anchorage. You go past you go past the military post there, and Fort Richardson, and head on, and you run right into Eagle River. So
exactly. Wow, you know it well. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. It's a great place. There's a couple of good little pubs there. I was in the service, so of course we're going to find those, right?
Yeah. So you know all about it. Yeah. Well, I left before I was 18, so I didn't get to experience many of those pubs.
Okay. Well, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
So now, what took you there? Was your dad like in the service or something?
No, my dad is actually a petroleum engineer. So we moved up there, and he worked in the oil field.
All right. So that's interesting. How long were you in Alaska for your entire growing up? Or?
Yeah, pretty much from 6 to 17. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I started my life in New Mexico. That's where all my extended family lives, and I spent all my summers in the deserts, and then the rest of the time just tromping around the woods up in the AK. And at 17, I actually left. I left early in high school and went to Central America. My story is kind of crazy. I went everywhere. I lived abroad for almost 10 years after that.
So where did you go to in Central America?
First, I was in Guatemala. I spent 6 months there. And then when I was 17, just kind of taking some language schools and learning a little bit about the world. It's where I really, I think, got my heart for social justice issues. I started learning about poverty and genocide and exploitation and all of that. And it really set me on a course for my whole life. But after that, I lived a little bit in Europe, a little bit in South America and Venezuela. I spent many years down in Venezuela, Brazil. Just kind of going all over the place.
Now we're in Europe.
I lived in Spain for a while. My parents actually, after right around the time I went south, they sold everything in Alaska, and my dad opened a consulting company, and they lived abroad for the next 15 years. So I know I never get to talk about this stuff on podcasts. It's always, motorcycles and other stuff. So this is really cool. Yeah. My parents lived abroad, and they were in every year or two, they would change countries. So they were in from Norway to Dubai to Indonesia to New Zealand to, you name it. They pretty much went there and worked. So I got to travel around a little bit with them as well. But on my own, I was in Spain and then back to South America.
So Guatemala, what made you pick Guatemala? Because that's, Guatemala's had a lot of issues, you go El Salvador, being a neighbor, Honduras, another neighbor. Those are countries that have a lot of problems. And the social issues, if you want to turn around, find one, there's one on every corner, and then some. So why Guatemala?
Yeah, so my uncle was a photojournalism professor, and he's actually the one who bought me my first camera, which really is the work I'm doing
Okay.
now in photographing survivors of human trafficking. But when I was 15 or so, he got me my first Nikon film camera, and every summer he was taking university students down to Guatemala. He specialized in photographing and documenting the hybrid religions of the Guatemalan highlands. So kind of random,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah, so I got to go with him that summer between my junior and senior year, and he stayed a month, and then I stayed 5 months or 6 months.
So
So
So when you talk about the hybrid religions, are you talking about like Catholicism meeting, early Mayan
yeah,
belief and
exactly.
everything? Okay, sure.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
fascinating stuff. Yeah, that
It
how
is.
they've
It
pulled
really is.
traditions from both, and yeah, so he's spent his basically his entire professional career documenting that. It's pretty phenomenal. So he taught me how to use a camera and take portraits, and
Okay.
yeah, the rest is history for that.
So did you get to go see any of the Mayan cities like Capan or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah, Tikal, and yeah, I spent a
Okay.
long time there, and then I visited again several times after that. I really, really fell in love with Guatemala and the people, and yeah, I mean all of Central America. And then later I came back with the backpack, and I did the whole from Mexico to Panama, just with my backpack and stuff like that.
Well, it's and that's I'm glad you're saying that, talking about, the people, because the people are wonderful. And that's what a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
a lot of folks don't understand. The press or different things you read, you hear about the violence, but that's few. But unfortunately, they affect the many down there, and that's what's really sad. I spent a lot of time in Trujillo. We had a base camp there. It was called Regional Military Training Center. We
Mm,
did a lot of stuff that we did, a lot of outreach. It was with Special Forces Group. So we always did a lot of things where we were working with the people, and food and inoculations, just triage, different things like that. And so for me, I got a humanitarian award when I was there for the military, and I have a number of other awards, but that's the one I'm really the proudest of. And I think that kind of set me up for things I personally do. So I love hearing this, and I'm just so glad that it's really captured your heart. Now, we're probably going to bore people with this. No, I'm not bored, but you, now I believe your dad rode motorcycles. Is that correct?
that's
Okay.
right. Yeah, my dad rode his whole life. He did grow up in the military. He was a military kid, and he spent most of his childhood in Japan. And he just had a little motorcycle, and he went everywhere on it from like, I don't know, he must have been in elementary school. And
Okay.
yeah, so later in life, I got my license, and he basically taught me everything I know. And we spend a lot of time together on our bikes. We've traveled all over the United States. We like to do long distance moto camping trips together. And
That's cool.
yeah, we've done a couple of international trips, Peru and South Africa, on BMWs, and that was really fun. But yeah, my
Peru would
dad
be
my
fun.
dad really taught me how to ride.
Peru, Peru would be awesome. I had a short visit down there for few weeks, and I loved it. Colombia, not so much, but I would have loved it, but not under the circumstances I was there for. So now,
Yeah,
but your grandfather rode too, right?
both of my grandfathers did, but
Both
yeah,
of
particularly on the Trantham side, and my brother rides a little, and yeah, we just like the two wheels, I guess.
Okay. So it's definitely in your blood. It's something that's been passed down and everything. So that's incredible. So you you were getting into a lot of things, but so you went on a 10,000-mile ride, and I kind of like you to explain people, about that ride. But the most important thing is why you rode.
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, I had been traveling all over the country with my dad, and I had done some solo trips at that time, just moto camping and visiting different states. And so I had already had that under my belt. I've been riding for almost 20 years now at this point. I'm in my late 30s. And when I was in I guess about 6 years ago, so mid to early 30s, I was going through a divorce. And it was a really rock bottom moment for me. I like to jokingly refer to it as the annihilation. It was like a really hard time for me. Um,
Yeah.
I just felt like really, really heartbroken and sort of blindsided by this divorce and the end of this marriage. And I had went to a counselor, And this counselor was really great. But within the first hour, she said to me, like, Lauren, your husband at the time, soon to be ex-husband, is like very emotionally abusive. And I was kind of shell shocked. I didn't believe her. I was like, but he never hit me. And she said, well,
Right.
it's more complicated than that. And she gave me some literature to read and a couple of books. And I started looking around on the internet at different articles. And I came to realize that actually I had been living in a very emotionally abusive relationship. But because I didn't know the signs, I just didn't know. And as naive as that sounds, I think a lot of people can find themselves in that situation. We don't really talk about the red flags of emotional abuse as much as we do physical abuse.
No.
So yeah, it was really became a year of education for me, where I had to try to figure out what had happened to me to see if I could heal from it. And I had to basically overcome an identity crisis at that point, because here I am feeling like I'm this confident, right? I've traveled all over the world by myself. I have college degree and I have like all of these accomplishments that like brave people do. And, here I was sitting on this couch with this counselor, and she's telling me I'm basically an abuse victim. And I just couldn't reconcile the two. I couldn't reconcile that situation with who I thought I was. And so that's what I mean when I say identity crisis. So my organization, which is called Ride My Road, and those initial 10,000 miles was really born out of this desire to try to figure out, how did I find myself in that situation and how was I going to heal from it? And so
Sure.
I'm also a photographer, professional headshots and things like that. I photographed primarily women, women entrepreneurs. Like, I wasn't doing weddings or babies or anything like that. It was very specific what I was doing with my photography at this time, to empower women, which is very ironic. It's a super ironic part of my journey, where I was showing other women, how they could be strong and confident, when really I was kind of like dying inside. So, so I thought, how can I take my camera, my motorcycle, how can I go out on the road? How can I learn more about abuse? How can I see how other people have healed from it? And so I decided to partner with a local organization here in Oregon. They're an anti-trafficking organization, and they have an online school where they mentor survivors of human trafficking in the United States. And at the time, I didn't even know human trafficking happened in the United States, not in the way that I understand now. And because they have this online school that's nationwide, they have this database of survivors. And so basically, I just chose a route. I did like a big circle square, hitting all the borders. And we sent out an email to their network of survivors, offering an opportunity for professional headshots from me. And we had to cap it at 40. The response was overwhelming. And so a couple months later, I was out on the road. I did the 10,000 miles. I photographed almost 40 survivors of human trafficking. We raised a lot of money on that campaign. And the rest has just been a result of that heartbreak, honestly.
So what was the hardest part about doing that journey? Would it have been the miles, the weather? What I actually imagine was probably the hardest part about that journey was the stories of the victims. And sometimes when you hear those stories, which they had to have broken your heart and made it difficult to hear that. So what was the hardest part for you?
Yeah, I mean, so my divorce happened in like a November, or like my life blew up. Like, my life as I knew it from one day to the next was completely just ended. And so that was in November. Well, I was on the road already the following September. And so, to be honest, like, I really hadn't done any major healing. Like, I was still in the thick of it. And then I go on this trip and I have insomnia and I'm just crying like all the time. And it was just, it was a lot of long miles. I also did it on a Ducati Monster,
Yeah.
the S4RS, which, as most people will agree, is not necessarily the best bike to tour on. So I was having physical issues, my own emotional struggles. And then, you hit the nail on the head, meeting these survivors and really coming to terms with the scope of the problem in the United States and how we don't really understand how prolific exploitation is right here in our own country. Like, that was really hard. And that was tough. One of the caveats to this endeavor is that I never asked the survivor to share their stories with me. This wasn't about interviewing them.
Sure.
This was meant to be a gift. We still do these portraits today, but it's meant to be a gift to the survivor. Many of them shared with me that they didn't have, the only photographs they had of themselves was when they were being exploited, or their mugshots when they were arrested for being exploited. And so to be able to provide them a photo shoot where they are the center of attention and we are celebrating the triumph of what they've, what has occurred in their life, that's the point of it. So not every survivor shares their story with me. That's completely up to them. But having said that, I was hearing a lot of stories, and it was really, really, really hard. It took me years to recover.
I'm sure it did, but I think, and I'm just talking from personal experience, sometimes in doing something like this, the pain is part of what creates the healing. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but you've been there, and I think you probably would agree with it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
part of the journey.
Yeah. And, beyond them just sharing these horrible things that happened to them, they also shared with me so many gems about life. Because if you think about that population, that section of the population are the most resilient people that we have. I mean, they have literally survived through hell. People who live in exploitation, prostituted people, people who are sex trafficked, the numbers, the survival rate is like in the low 1 to 3%. And the average lifespan for somebody experiencing exploitation in that way is about 6 years. So when we're talking about somebody who survived that, like that is literally against all odds. And they have a lot of wisdom to share. And they were very generous with me in that way.
So tell me about what you're, beyond what you do with the photo shots and everything else, the money that you raise and everything. Where, how do you spend it? How is that spent? What kind of causes does that go to?
Yeah, sure. So when we first started, I just had partnered with the Elevate Academy from the Rebecca Bender Initiative. And that initial campaign, together with their networks, we raised almost $60,000. And that went directly to them to continue their online school. And again, when I started this, I didn't know that it was going to be what turned into what it is today. I thought it was just going to be a personal photography project. When I came home off the road, I realized that people were really interested in that journey, and they continued to want to donate, and they continued wanting to learn about human trafficking. And that's when I decided to turn it into its own 501c3. So in the beginning, that wasn't the plan at all, but it morphed into that, especially because, as we know, most of the work that we do is within the motorcycle community, and motorcyclists are incredibly generous. It's such a good group of people. And so they just kept inviting me to speak at different events and things. And so to answer your question, once we became a 501c3, I set our pillars so that the funds that we raise, we grant back out to organizations that are founded by survivors. So we call them survivor-led organizations, and they're offering direct support to other survivors. And so over the years, we have supported all kinds of organizations, from the online school. We still support the Elevate Academy, the one that I partnered with in the beginning. And that is a university style education for survivors. They receive job training, resume support, lots of information like how to dress for the workplace, or how to deal with triggers in the workplace. Complex PTSD, all kinds of things. And that's an incredible program. We've also supported organizations that teach survivors how to code, or that teach survivors how to manage social media so they can get jobs. We have events and we do things all over the country. So we have quite a network of survivor-led organizations that we support, and they're all vetted and have good standing within the community, and that's where the funds go. So having met and photographed so many survivors, I understand that if we don't support survivors in this way, we are losing out on all the wisdom that they have to share. So that's why we support survivor-led orgs, or highly survivor-informed orgs.
So tell me certain ways that we could go about, as individuals in the public, educating ourselves to this, or what you would recommend people could, what resources do they have to learn more? I know that I came across a thing for, what was it? I saw it. Totally forgetting my train of thought, but it was something for people that could be for signs of people, kind of recruiters and stuff with you. Disruptors, that's what it was.
Disruptors, yep, that's us. Yeah, I mean, I think step one is to probably forget everything that you think you know about human trafficking in the United States. You know, we have movies like Taken where Liam Neeson is busting down doors, and not that that doesn't exist. I mean, if you're ex-military, you understand maybe a little bit more about that than I do, but the majority of human trafficking does not look like what we think it looks like. And unfortunately, there's a lot of like fake news out there about it. There's all these like these stories that go viral, and they either turn out to be like completely made up, or, you know, and then the FBI has to spend all this time, and all the anti-trafficking orgs, we have to spend all this time like debunking these like crazy myths about how this occurs. You know, the percentages are tough to nail down, but I think it's something like less than 5% of human trafficking in the United States is kidnapping. It's it looks completely different than, like I said, the movie Taken. And the majority of human trafficking in the United States is happening to United States citizens. This isn't just something where people are brought across the border. Human smuggling is different than human trafficking, and that's something I think a lot of people don't understand. So first step to getting educated is to really just kind of wipe the slate of what we think we know. Secondary, I would follow survivor organizations. We have a list on our website, and I'm constantly posting about them. I made a reel on my Instagram last week of books written by survivors that you can check out to really get the ins and outs of how this is happening. And lastly, we do have a class for that. So for if you're an average everyday person, and this is either a cause that's dear to your heart or it's a cause that's new to you, you can sign up on our website for our online university. It's called Disruptors University. It's an 8 to 10 week course. We just meet 1 hour a week. I bring in some of the head people in the movement, survivor leaders and experts, and each week is a different class on a different aspect of trafficking. So by the time you graduate our Disruptors University, you're going to know a lot more.
So speaking of, debunking the myth of the kidnappings and everything else. So kind of explain to us how the recruiting does work. How do they find their victims?
Yeah, so according to the Polaris Project, they manage the National Anti-Human Trafficking Hotline, the 188 number you see around on bathroom stalls and at the airport. They've managed to collect enough data to understand that there's actually 25 typologies of human trafficking in the United States that they've identified. So like I said, it's not just this one way, right? So in our country, we are actually seeing an increase in massage parlor exploitation. So I would encourage people to look around their cities at some of the either Asian massage parlors or massage parlors that aren't like listed or they don't have names. Like maybe just reach out to your local law enforcement and kind of just ask them like, hey, what's going on with massage parlors in my city? Because they're everywhere. It's one of the fastest growing crimes we have right now. So like that's one way that it's happening. Which is people probably coming in from different countries, right? But that is something that American men are supporting. So that's something to remember, right? We're also seeing a huge increase in online exploitation. NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, saw a 97.5% increase in online enticement from predators to children just from 2017 to 2019. And, you know, when the pandemic hit, those numbers just skyrocketed. So ways that trafficking happens is that there's just people online that are unfortunately grooming and recruiting kids through apps. And there's a lot more information on that. If you guys want to visit NCMEC, the organization Thorn has great resources for if you have kids, like how are you going to protect them online? And then the third way that is kind of the most prominent is what we really think of as prostitution in this country. And this is a big myth to bust about human trafficking, because in the eyes of the law, when we think about pimps, that's a human trafficker. And if we look at prostitution in this country and exploitation, something like in the mid 90s, 90% of people who are in prostitution have pimps. So this is one of the biggest things that we are trying to shed light on so that people can think about this issue differently. Think about a pimp, like they control the comings and goings of the person. They control the finances, right? There's quotas to be filled. If those quotas aren't met, they're enforced with physical violence. Like it's, but in our culture, we just think like, oh, that person wants to be there, or they made that choice, or they've just made poor choices in their life, and that's the result. And unfortunately, it's much more nuanced than that. And so those are just 3 examples, but the massage parlors, the online enticement, prostitution, prostituted people. So those are some of the things that we go over in our online university.
So besides, the sex trade business and being pulled into that victims, what other industries are they being exploited in?
Hospitality, beauty, modeling. Yeah, I would recommend checking out the Polaris Project to get a better sense of what it looks like in your community, because every community is a little bit different. I mean, if we're talking about downtown New York City versus small town Missouri, we want to be sure that you guys are getting educated about what it looks like in your city. So I would recommend also just Googling your town and say human trafficking and see what busts have come up and who's getting arrested for that and how that's happening. But yeah, I mean, I would say the internet is also like the first place to look. Like if you want to, that's the fastest growing right now, in addition to the massage parlors, is the online enticement.
So is there a typical profile most victims fit? Age, sex, I'm sure it's female, what age group? I mean, what are most of these people, that are looking to victimize somebody? What is their ideal victim?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, unfortunately, there's a market for every type of human being. So if there's a market for it, the traffickers and the exploiters will go out and find those people. So yes, children, boys are trafficked, LGBTQ, runaways, the transgender community, women, girls, adults. Like I said, there's a market for everything. And especially, I don't usually get into this too much, but when we look at pornography and how pornography ties directly into demand and exploitation in that way. But having said that, primarily the most people who are in prostitution are Black and brown women from vulnerable populations and lower incomes. So when we talk about like sex work is work, maybe that's true for a small number of people, but the majority of people who are in the sex work industry are already coming from vulnerable and minority populations.
Well, they're victims of their circumstance in a lot of ways. So that's
they're targeted, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So we're going, obviously a lot of bikers are going to watch this, and they're going to be checking it out. You ride, you're part of the community as well. What roles, what things can us bikers, as people are out on the road, what signs can we be looking for, and how can we help?
Yeah. So, and we do a lot of stuff at events. Like we were invited to the Sturgis rally because trafficking happens at Sturgis. Trafficking happens at Daytona Bike Week. Anytime there's a large gathering of men that have departed from their home zip codes, trafficking and sex buying increases. So that's something to think about. I would say the very first step is don't buy sex.
Right.
And talk to your friends about not buying sex, because if there was no demand, we would not be having this conversation. This is $1 billion industry, and it's driven primarily by upper middle class, white, married American men. And what happens is they think that they're buying sex, and they don't take the time to find out, how did this person I'm purchasing actually end up here? So there's like a disassociation of, this is harmless, this is a victimless crime, versus what is the reality of actually is happening. So that's always the first step. I really want to share that message among bikers. Like, let's just talk about not buying sex, first of all. And the thing about human trafficking is that the movement in itself is primarily pushed by women. Like, it's mostly women organizations that are trying to like get a handle on this, and we need more good men to join the fight. We believe that most men are good. Most men are not buying sex. They're not exploiting others. And that's actually a pillar of ours at Ride My Road, is we celebrate good men. But what we need is for good men to go out and spread the word among their peer groups. Talk to your nephews, talk to your children, your children's friends, anybody that you have a sphere of influence with. Let them know that purchasing sex really isn't that cool. Getting strippers at your bachelor party, right? Like, this is all like a slippery slope of exploitation that in our culture has become very normalized. And so that's the first step. And especially at biker rallies where, like I said, it's kind of crazy, right? Like, we go to rallies because like, who knows what's going to happen, but we want to keep that in mind as well. We don't want to just be a part of group. Like, we don't want to be this industry that celebrates freedom and nobody can tell us what to do. And we love being out on the open road, while at the same time, like, be a huge demographic for exploiting vulnerable people. Right. So there's that. And then of course, just like, red flags is I would visit the Polaris Project again and jot down the human trafficking hotline number. And anytime you see anything suspicious, give them a call. That is an organization that runs off information. So maybe you'll be helping them with a license plate or something, or a suspicious something that could break a case for them from 3 states over, right? We don't know. So
what would be, I mean, is there anything that we should heighten our senses to, be alert for when we're out there, that may be something that's indicative of human trafficking that maybe we don't otherwise recognize, because it's real easy. We get in a rush, we're doing our thing, but still we might not see it unless we, kind of attune our brains to watch for these things. What should we watch for?
Yeah, it's kind of what I mentioned earlier. Like, oftentimes survivors or victims won't have access to their own money, or they'll be kind of really on like a short leash with like a gentleman. The population that has most access to victims is actually healthcare. Many survivors see many physicians in the time that they're being trafficked, and nobody knows. And so it's hard to spot. But if you can tell, like, if someone is with them and won't let them go anywhere by themselves, doesn't let them control their money. Also tattoos, that's a big one. Anything that's like property of, or so like money symbols, crowns. So there's some tattoos and some things like that. And then I just think, like, if you see something that just feels off, like, just trust your intuition and give the hotline a call, because you want to, like I said, give them the information, and you also never, ever want to intervene. Never. If you intervene, it could make it way worse for the victim.
So is most trafficking being done by individuals or small groups, or are they larger criminal organizations?
Yeah, all of the above. All of the above. When we talk about massage parlors, that's like Chinese mafia stuff. I don't know a ton about like that element of it, but that's really what I think is happening. Also, there's gang trafficking. There's familial trafficking, where children are being trafficked by their parents. And that has been a statistic that's really tough to tie down, but numbers are coming out that as many as 40% of children who are trafficked by a family member, right? So we also want to look, it's not, like I said, it's not just strangers out in the world who seem like they're trapped, right? But it's people who have access to your kids and people who have access to the children in your community. Are you paying attention to that? So, yeah, okay. Tough stuff. I know.
Now, if there's somebody that should see this, okay, and they're a victim, what would your recommendation to them be? What should they do?
A victim?
Yes.
Like if they're watching this interview?
If they're currently a victim of trafficking, what would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, also call the hotline. They have a lot of resources for victims. So it's not just for tips, it's for people who need to escape. And they partner with a lot of different orgs in different counties and in different cities so that you can get support where you're located. So I mentioned too that the school we partner with, the Elevate Academy, they've just done a major partnership with the Elevate Academy, so that if anybody calls, I'm sorry, with the Polaris Project, so that if anybody calls and they're a victim, they can automatically get enrolled into the Elevate Academy for support. So there's a lot of support out there. And yeah, I would just tell them that they're not alone, and that people care. I spoke earlier about like being good men and fighting for this. Like, I've photographed so many survivors now, and when I tell them that like men get involved with our organization, it changes something for them, because they realize like, hey, there's actually people out here who care about me, and who are fighting for me, and that's life changing. We call that the acts of love. So just to remember they're not alone, and that there are a lot of people out there that care.
So some of the stories, sometimes you hear stuff about like people being trafficked or taken for harvesting organs. Is that something that does take place, or
I'm
prevalent?
sure it does. It's not my area of expertise. It's not something I've ever actually personally come across in all the survivors that I've met. But, that's where like the FBI comes in. You can research a little bit of that. I'm like I said, I'm sure it happens. I'm just not familiar with it.
Well, and unfortunately, maybe there's not, survivors to talk about that either.
That's true. That's true.
So, where are some of the areas? Is there certain areas around the country? Obviously, you brought up some really good points. Wherever there's a lot of men coming together that are out of their zip code, contributes. Is there hot areas of this country that that get exploited more than others? As far as finding victims, where they try to recruit and grab people and bring them in.
I think before the internet, that was probably the case. But now with the internet, it's everywhere. I mean, you can order a person on the internet as fast as you can order a pizza, unfortunately. And so the demand is everywhere. This is a cultural issue that we're facing, where it doesn't matter where you live. If you feel entitled to purchase another person for your own sexual gratification, that's available to you, unfortunately. And so, yeah, there's really no hot spots. I mean, the thing about rural America, for example, is it does happen there a lot, but there's just not as many services. So we don't hear about it as often. We hear about it in the big cities or along the corridors of the highways. But unfortunately, I can just tell you, it happens everywhere, in every county, every city.
Yeah, and I believe that. So now, what about, you hear a lot of things talked about the border and issues at the border. Are those people victimized more? Is that an issue for them?
Well, that's where we talk about the difference between human trafficking and human smuggling. Many people are smuggled across the border. That doesn't mean that they're going to be trafficked when they arrive.
Sure.
Right. And so that's a different issue. And I know like a lot of people there, that's such a hot topic in our country. It's hard to get a good understanding to most people about what that means. Are people brought over and trafficked? Yes, absolutely. But the majority of people who are trafficked in the United States are United States citizens.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, because I was curious, because it's, you hear a lot of different reports and people talking about that, and I wanted to know, how that affected, your cause and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit more about riding. Where are we going to go do some riding next to kind of raise awareness?
Yeah. So I'm actually hitting the road again. So I did the 10,000 miles 6 years ago. That was 2016. And then I took a couple of years off because of the injuries I sustained on that trip. I had like an overuse injury in my arms, and then I got steroid injections in my elbows, and I had a reaction, and it atrophied all of the fat and tissue in my elbow joints. They're really, you can see they're still quite bony. But I didn't get to ride for almost 2 years after that happened.
You were a hot mess.
I was a hot mess. Like I told you, I call it the annihilation. Like it broke me down in every way possible. But I'm so happy that I recovered and I was able to go back out on the road last year. I switched from my Monster S4RS to a Scrambler Desert Sled. And I did another tour. I did 7 states last year and photographed 30 more survivors, which was really cool. Except for I did that journey through that heat dome.
Mhm.
every state, every city, excuse me, every city I rode through hit their historical high. So that was tough. But this summer I'm going to go north. So in a month or two, I'm going to leave Southern Oregon, ride up through Seattle and then BC and then Vancouver and make my way over to Banff and Calgary and come down through Montana. And
Well, it'd be a beautiful ride.
yeah, I'm really excited for the ride. I'm still going to be photographing survivors, and I'm hoping to partner with some Native American tribes and the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples movement. So I'm excited for this summer, and yeah, I'm just excited to ride up there. I grew up in Alaska, but I've never ridden or been to BC at all.
Okay, good for you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something about going to Sturgis. Are you going to Sturgis this year?
Probably not this year. I haven't been in a couple of years. We went several years in a row and held our fast ride, which was Fight Against Sex Trafficking. And we had a lot of success with that. But through the pandemic, I didn't get to go. And now my dates are already booked up for this trip. So I'll be sad to miss
Okay.
it. Are you guys going?
Yeah, we'll be there. So
Awesome.
yeah, we have a good time there. We host a couple of events and whatnot. So we're really looking forward to that. What
Very.
about the 120th for Harley Davidson?
No, tell me more about that.
Well, it just came to mind because you're talking about Sturgis, but you're talking the 120th for Harley Davidson. Every 5 years is a big celebration. 115th was big. 120th is huge. People come from all over the world. It's a very, very diversified group of people that come in, and they come in very large numbers, but it's very international, even more so than Sturgis or Daytona. So I would say that it's probably going to be a hot spot for that period of time, especially when you're talking, you know, you've got Milwaukee, Chicago's to the south and everything, decent, big cities. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of women brought in for exploitation and everything else. And I would think because of that movement and everything, it would be a little bit easier maybe to identify some of those people involved and everything as well. But getting the word out to the general public, because like you said, without the demand, there's no reason to create a supply. And, that's really the best thing we could do as individuals. Again, I don't participate in anything like that, but anybody that does, you're helping create a problem, and a problem that could, one day involve somebody that's a loved one of your own. So, don't do it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Mario. Yeah. And that's really all we need is we need platforms like this to talk to other men about it. Because it's, in one hand, it's very complicated. On the other, it's pretty basic. Like, just don't exploit people. And, so yeah, I'll be interested to hear what law enforcement will be doing at that event. I know Sturgis, that's why we got invited, was because they bring in law enforcement from all over the country to volunteer to tackle human trafficking during the rally. They've had some press releases of some arrests that have been made over the last couple of years. And so it's really encouraging when, they're on top of it. So hopefully that will be happening at the Harley event.
Sure, I hope so as well. So maybe we can find some way to get you out here, connect you with some people. So now you say you're in Southern Oregon. We're at in Southern Oregon.
I kind of lost your audio. I can hear you, but it's really low. Oh, and now I have an echo.
Okay. So you say you're in Southern Oregon. We're in Southern Oregon.
Yeah, I have an echo.
I'm not sure. Cody?
There it goes. Now you're back.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What area of Southern Oregon are you located in?
I'm in the Rogue Valley. We are just up from the California border.
Yeah. I just drove through that not too long ago.
No kidding.
What's the little town there that's that hosts the big Shakespeare festival? It's right
Ashland.
outside. Yeah, Ashland.
Yeah, I'm right outside of Ashland.
Yeah, that's a cool little town. I like that town. So,
it's cool. Yeah, and there's great riding around here too.
Oh, there's beautiful riding. I mean, that's a pretty ride.
Yeah.
Now the one thing is that you'll be going along and you'll see a sign. It'll say so far. It'll say exit to the falls or some falls. And I got off and like, falls. So I got off and then I saw the next sign told me it was 162 miles away. So I got right back on the highway. I mean, if it was like a mile or two away, I'm game. I wasn't driving 162 miles. Now I did get off the road. I did get off to kind of take some pictures of Mount Shasta. Once I got Northern California, so that's special.
So we're gonna do another thing. So something we do with everybody who comes on our show is we ask them 3 questions. They're all the same questions, but we like the diversity, just as we like the diversity of the people that come on here. We love the diversity of the answers of the questions. So you ready for your questions?
Sure.
Okay. If you could go ride with anybody, past or present, who would you like to go ride with?
I mean, maybe this is a standard answer, but I think riding with my granddad. He passed when I was 8, and I never got to spend much time with him. And I think that would be so cool to do, like a couple of generations, have my dad there, my granddad. Yeah,
I think that's probably the best answer.
that'd be so fun, wouldn't it? Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things you can speculate on what that ride would be like, and maybe the stories that would get passed between you, and yeah, that would be extremely special.
Mm-hmm.
So now, this might be a really, really good question for you because the way you eat up miles. If you could own any bike, what would you like to own?
This is such a funny question to me because I'm really kind of a love the one you're with type of person. Like I love my Monster. I love my sled. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of a boring answer, but I own them already.
No, and actually that just shows your dedication. So I think that kind of speaks to your personality. And then the last question, if you could go ride anywhere in the world, anywhere, where would you like to go ride?
Argentina's pretty high on my list. I think that I've heard that it's just so beautiful down there. And I had such a blast in Peru. And I think that that might be my next trip.
Okay. Wonderful. I love that. So, well, you'll have to share that with us. So before we go, I mean, let's remind people where they can find some of this information. Obviously, you said they can go to Polaris organization.
Yeah, for the Polaris Project, for just general information about human trafficking, I would check out Thorn. If you have kiddos and you really want to learn more about how to keep them safe online. And then, of course, our website, ridemyroad.org. We are launching our next Disruptors University here in a couple of weeks. We have events and stuff we're doing all the time. So check that out. And then on our website, we have a page of resources. So you can visit other websites to see where you can get more resources just for where you live as well.
And if people want to contribute financially, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, we have a little donate tab on our website, and it's pretty easy. Just click on the donate tab, and then you can choose to do a one-time or a recurring, and know that the funds are going to, like I said, survivor-led organizations. We also have our annual report on there from what we got to raise and give away last year, which was incredible. And then I'm about to open up a campaign for the survivor portraits that I'm doing this summer. For $250 only, you can sponsor a survivor to get their professional headshots from me, which includes everything leading up to the photo shoot, the actual photo shoot, and then they get a professionally printed album at the end, which has been a really beautiful gift to give to survivors. So for $250, you can sponsor one of those. We have 30 or 40 coming up this year, so I'm about to open that up. So
that's really special.
Yeah. And you can also see some of the photographs on there, and hear some of the testimonials about how much that means to survivors. So when you contribute, like they're making a difference.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, let's make sure we'll get that information out for you. If anybody ever wants to engage with you, either bring you on like a podcast or bring you on as a guest speaker or anything else, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, shoot me an email at lauren@ridemyroad.org. You can also, all our socials are at Ride My Road as well. So I'm always hanging out on the socials and posting stuff up. So you can reach me there or shoot me an email. But thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Lauren, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to be following your adventures and whatnot. We have a couple of different places. We'll make sure we continue to share the information about you, your organization, and all your good works. And I personally want to thank you for all the good work you're doing out there.
Thank you, Mario. And thanks for having me on, and congrats on such an awesome podcast.
Yes. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Good night, folks.
Okay.